Excellent. Alright. Unmute the microphone. Step 1. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Konnichiwa. We're going to be continuing on what we looked at last week with our count as a bit of revision more than anything. So in the chat I posted the link. Let's post it again. But there's a link to this Google Doc, otherwise you can just type in this URL. This is where I'll be running the lessons from. I've also got another link here to my add-on Gumtree. I do private Japanese lessons. Basically I'm doing lessons here on YouTube, mainly just so my current students have some materials to look back upon. But I thought I might as well record it and make it available for everyone else. The prices are here. You can email me, ashdcan@gmail.com, if you want to know more. Okay. So I thought we'd just do a little bit of revision before we get going. And we're going to be revising our numbers a little bit here. Now, we haven't quite done some of these questions, but we know, oops, gave it away there, but we know how to say the answers at least. Okay, so for our first question, what do we have here? So it says, Nansai desu ka? Okay, I was actually writing all the Romaji, but I thought I really don't like to encourage people to read Japanese and Romaji. I said this in kind of my first lesson. It's a short-term, I don't even want to say solution. It's just basically avoidance. If you want to get good at Japanese, at a bare minimum, you have to learn hiragana. And not just be able to read it, you have to be able to write it. And one way you can get better at it is if you've got Japanese input turned on your computer. It's quite easy to do that. You can look up a guide how to do it. You can practice doing Japanese input. But yeah. So anyway, the question, how old are you? So nansai desu ka? Okay. So if you've done your revision, you should recognize this sai from our last lesson on counters. And sai is a counter used to talk about the age of living things, basically humans. I guess animals as well, but humans are animals, so animals, I guess I should say. And nan, this word should be getting kind of familiar. Nan or nani both mean what. Alright, so what age, and then desu ka. So we've got a polite bit, and then we've got our ka, which is a question marker. Alright, so the answer we've got down here is I am 35 years old. So how would we do this? Well, I've already pointed out that we've got a counter here. And so how do counters work? Well, normally it's a number followed by the counter. So we've got a number, and then we need a counter. We already know what the counter is. It's sai. So we just have to say 35. So how do you say 35 in Japanese? Well, you say basically 3, 10, and then 5. Okay. So the answer would be this. 35歳です. Okay, 3, 3, 10, 10, 5, 5, and then our counter, sai. So 35 years old. Alright, and just remember that this I am is kind of implied in Japanese. Okay, so a lot of you, especially people who are just starting out with Japanese, you might want to say something like, Watashi wa 35歳です. And there's no problem with that. Let me just grab something quickly. Now there's no problem with saying that, but just keep in mind if someone's asked for your age, they're asking for your age, so you don't have to come back and say, well, I am blah blah blah. I know we do this in English, but in Japanese we don't bother. So at the same time, the person who's asking you is not going to really say, how old are you? You know, they will just say, nansai desu ka? You see there's no word for you or me or whatever. You know, they're not saying anata wa. Okay, it's kind of implied that they're saying this. Anata is the word for you, but in general conversation, you know, if someone's kind of staring at you and asking you a question, it's pretty obvious who they're asking the age about, and also with the answer. Okay, you're not saying watashi wa. So it's kind of a hard habit to break, but once you do break it, you'll notice you'll speak a lot quicker in Japanese because you're not having to put kind of useless words at the front that the usual Japanese person is not going to say. Okay, what about our next question? Alright, well, we've got ikura desu ka? Okay, might be a new word for some of you, but ikura just means how much. We're talking about prices of things, basically. Ikura desu ka? Alright, and then we see our answer is 3,000 yen. So how would we say this in Japanese? Well, we're going to need to remember the word for thousand. Okay, and this is sen. Is 1,000. Okay, now this is another counter. Alright, 3,000. Okay, so we already saw the word for 3. It's sun. But remember, we've got a bit of an exception with this word. Well, it's not really an exception, it's just the reading changes. So sun, zen. Okay, notice we get a dakuten on top of this se. So it's not sen, it's zen. Kind of like. Okay, we have a Z sound instead of an S sound, because that's what happens to this S row on our hiragana chart when we add dakutens to them. Alright, and then we've got the word for yen in Japanese, which is actually pronounced N, E-N. So it's han, zen, and des. Okay, so kind of a, you know, we've got some politeness here, and of course we're going to have the politeness back. Alright, switching up a little bit, but still looking at counters, we have the question. So, ima nanji desu ka? So, ima is the word for now. Nanji. Alright, so before we saw nansai, and now we're seeing nanji. So, ji is our o'clock, basically. So, nanji desu ka? Ima nanji desu ka? What time is it now? Alright. Now the answer is 9:24. So how will we say this in Japanese? Well, remember we've got, first of all, our PM comes at the front of the word, so we have to know this one first. Okay, but this is gogo. And then we have to do our hours, followed by our hour counter, and then our minutes, followed by our minute counter. So we've got the hour counter up here. So this is what we've got so far. Gogo, so PM, kuji. Okay, just remember that certain hours and certain minutes have exception readings again. Well, not really exception readings again, but changing readings. So instead of kyuji, this is kuji. Okay, and then to say 24, well, remember the rule is that it's kind of the smallest number which keeps the exception readings, and everything else is just read normally. So the 20 part we would just read as niju. Niju. Okay, but then to say 4 minutes, so to say this small part, we have to follow that table I showed in our counters lesson. So this would be yon pun. Alright, not yon fun or any kind of variation like that. Yon pun. Alright, so gogo kuji 24分です. 9:24. Now if you notice that this is quite long when we write it out in hiragana, because we can write this out in kanji and it's a lot shorter. Just show you. Okay, 24分. Keep in mind though that when you're writing left to right, like English style writing, you don't really, well, I don't know, I guess this is up for debate, but Japanese people are kind of more likely to put these numbers, I think they're called Arabic numerals, but you know, these kind of numbers that we would refer to, I guess, as the numbers we use in English. When you're writing left to right, you'll put this in instead of the kanji for the numbers. When you're writing up and down, like the traditional Japanese style, right to left, then you're kind of more likely to use the kanji numbers, but it's much for muchness really. But we've got gogo, kuji, 24分. Okay, so we could write the time like this, and you can see it's quite a lot shorter. But the problem is we have to read the kanji. Alright, and speaking of words that end up way longer in hiragana than they would if they were in kanji, we've got a pretty standard question people will ask. So, 誕生日はいつですか? 誕生日はいつですか? So this is a new word for us. 誕生日. This means your birthday. 誕生. So B we've actually seen in a lot of different varieties, especially when we're looking at our counters, but this kanji means day, and 誕生 is birth. So 誕生日. And いつ, this word means when. 誕生日は as your birthday. いつですか? When is it? Okay, and we see the answer is October 8th, 1996. Okay, so remember Japanese people start from the year. So how would we say this? Well, we basically say 1996, and then we add the word for year on the end. Oops. Alright, so this is what we got so far for the year. So 1000 is 1000. 900, 900. 99, oops. Whoops. No one saw that. 96 nen. Alright, so 1996. Alright, and then our kanji for year, nen. Alright, and then we go with the month. Okay, so months are slightly easier. We just have to remember that they use counters, just like everything else pretty much in this test. And so we have the number of the month, so October, this is the 10th month of the year. And then we use our kanji, our kanji for months, which is pronounced as gatsu. Okay, so 10月. 10月, October. And then we end up with our smallest unit, which is the 8th. Okay, and this is, we just have to kind of refer to that table I showed in the other lesson until you kind of memorize these. But this is yoga. Yoga. Okay. So 1996年10月8日です. Alright, so again, kind of long. It's a lot shorter when you write it in kanji. Okay. Now, we looked at some other counters as well. Again, I showed a table and I kind of said, well, if you know all these counters, you're at about a Year 12, Australian Year 12 level, which is a pretty good level to be at. You don't need to know that many counters to get by in Japanese. There are way more in Japanese that you just don't need to know. And I was actually just having a conversation last night with a Japanese person, and she used the wrong counter, which I thought was kind of funny. So she was talking about chickens, alright? Niwatori. And birds have their own counter, which is wa. Okay? But, you know, because when you even Japanese, but it kind of shows you that this is what happens. When you think about a chicken, you don't really think about what counter applies to it. You kind of think, well, what's the type of animal it is? Because that's kind of how you think about counters. Counters apply to collect certain classes of objects. Alright, but we might just answer this first before I give it away. Whoops, gave it away anyway. But I gotta get used to this. So, inu o katte imasu ka? Alright, now this we haven't really done verbs at all yet. But this verb just means to raise or to rear or to keep. So you always use it with animals when you're saying, oh, do you have pets, basically. Alright, and we have inu, okay, for dog. So inu o katte imasu ka? Now I want to point out that this sentence, actually if we were going to be a bit more pedantic, we'd have to put this S in brackets, because there is no, with this sentence, it could mean, do you have a dog, do you have dogs? The plural is kind of included and excluded at the same time. I guess included, but not said. Alright, because we don't conjugate words in Japanese, depending on how many there are. We use, as we'll see in this answer, counters to show this S. Anyway, so you can just kind of ignore this verb for now. We will deal with verbs a lot more detail but later on. But inu o katte imasu ka? So do you have dogs? And the answer, hai. So yes, I do. Alright. And we see I have 3 dogs. So how would we say 3 dogs? Well, we would just say, we would just follow the same pattern we've been doing this whole time. We've got a counter here, so we need to say the number and then the counter. So then the tricky thing is, what's the counter? Alright, well, if you look back to your table, we'll see that dogs are included within the hiki counter because they're a small animal. Alright, now this hiki counter has a bit of a strange changing in pronunciation, and it's a pattern that you really have to learn if you want to get good at counters, because the one we're going to look at next with the cola, that's the same type of pattern. So once you learn that pattern once, that's it. It applies to lots of different counters. But anyway, it's sanbiki. Okay, so hiki is actually the counter for dogs. So sanbiki katte imasu. Okay, so notice we don't have the word dog. We don't have the word dog in this answer, but you know, biki is used for small animals like dogs, so it, you know, obviously it's continuing this. So anyway, back to my story. So this Japanese person said, I have, whatever, I can't even remember, like, I have 4 chickens. And she said, niwatori 4 hiki ga iru. Alright, I was like, wait a minute. 4 wa janai desu ka? It's like, isn't it? You know, you can't even really translate this into English, but she's like, oh, yep, that's right, sorry. Okay, so not to toot my own horn here, this is a pretty basic error to make in Japanese, but this person's been living in Australia for a long time and doesn't really speak Japanese all too often, I think, so she's starting to forget it a little bit. But it just shows you even Japanese people make these mistakes, and like I said, one of my favorite TV shows in Japan used to have a little segment where they would test Japanese people on the counters, and then if they got it wrong, they would have all these guys dressed up in sumo suits run on and hit them really hard. It's very funny. Okay, but that's our animal counter, small animal counter. Alright, this is a handy one. We can use it when we're asking for things in a shop. Okay, so we say 1 cola, so it's kind of the generic word for soft drink in Japan. Okay, and please, so we've got this word kudasai. Alright, but how do we count colas? Okay, well, colas fall into this category of long, thin objects. So we use this counter of hon. Right, but again we've got our changing pronunciation. So kola ippon kudasai. So please give me 1 cola. Okay. So this will take some time to get used to these counters. The best thing is really just to keep revising and revising and revising. and then really keep an ear out when they come up in conversation and go, wait a minute, why did they use that counter for that object? Try and work it out. And the other thing that I do, I mean even now, is that if I see an object where I'm not really sure, like I can't think immediately what the counter is, I'll pick it up and go, これはどうやって数えるんですか? So how do you count it? Or I will say something like, you know, whatever. If there's two of them, I'll just have a guess at what the counter is. Okay, because Japanese people will generally be able to correct you, despite what I said earlier. Okay. Alright, I want to look at something a little bit different today. It's not so much a grammar lesson, but it is a very important part about understanding Japanese. Now, I've got a link here to a Katakana table. I mean, you can use whatever one you want, really. This one I just like to use because it's a nice table, but really any Katakana table will do. But really what this is going to is, well, we have this whole script in Japanese called katakana, which is mainly used to represent foreign words of foreign origin, I guess I should say. So my name, names of countries, you know, all these English words that are in Japanese, and there are so many, trust me, so many, that we want to get very good at reading katakana words, because especially if any of you guys have been to Japan, you'll notice that outside, like on all the shops and all these kind of things, like they use katakana words a lot. Okay. Now the other reason to spend some time on this is that I feel like there is a bit of a technique in deciphering these katakana words. It's not as easy as just, well, as long as you've got the katakana table and you can put the romaji equivalents next to it, that you can just work out whatever the word is. No, it's not really the case. And I know this isn't the case because I read the exam reports for the Year 12 exams we have here, the final exams for Japanese in high school. And this is one of the most common criticisms that appears pretty much, I think, every single report of every year I've ever read. That, first of all, students do not pronounce katakana words properly. Okay, they don't pronounce them properly because there is an oral component of the exam, and that's a very common criticism, that students are pretty much just saying the English word with a slight Japanese accent. And I guarantee you, if you speak katakana words like that, I know it might sound so clearly, so clear and obvious that you're using an English word, but to a Japanese person, they won't understand it. You really have to pronounce it the katakana way. So the other criticism I see a lot is that people misspell katakana words in the written part of the exam. And again, this is because you pronounce it a certain way in English. It's not how you pronounce it in Japanese. So you're going to misspell it if you just try and replicate the English sound. You really have to think of these as just separate from English words. You really do. And then I guess the last problem, which I don't really see this as a criticism in the reports, but it's feedback I often get from my own students who really struggle to work out, well, when they have to read these words in an exam, they either take way too long to work out the word, or they just have no idea how to work out what this word actually is. So we're going to go through some techniques to kind of unpack these katakana words. Alright, so if I was going to give you some rules, if we're going to look at some rules to how do we decipher katakana words. Well, I think one of the most important things is, you know, treat these words as Japanese words. Okay? Second one, convince yourself that these words are, I guess I should originally say, originally come from English, and I should put a caveat here, 99% of the time. Okay, now what is this first rule for? Well, like I said, don't let the English part of your brain take over whenever a katakana word comes up. Because yes, most of the time they will be originally from an English word. But they are now katakana words. They've taken on a different pronunciation, and we'll see some words actually take on a different meaning. The Japanese people have imported this word and then just changed it to mean something different. And there's plenty of kind of weird ones which yeah, are quite impenetrable. But so it's important that you kind of treat them as Japanese words, alright? Don't just think of that they're just strangely pronounced English words. You really got to think of them differently because, like I said, they can sometimes be quite different in meaning from the original. Okay, now this second point is quite important, alright? Sometimes, and I'm sure there'll be a few when we look at this list, you'll read these words and go, there is no way that this was an English word originally, okay? But most of the time they are. I'll point out there are some examples where they aren't English words, but most of the time they will be. So just think of it that way. The other one is, you know, kind of a trite point, but pronounce the katakana exactly as it's written. Okay? Don't try and insert an English word or an English pronunciation in there when you don't even know what the word is. Just keep pronouncing the words. Okay, the next rule I would say is you just got to keep rereading out loud. Okay, very important. So you just keep reading it. Reread it over and over and over again, and then the more times you say it, sometimes it'll jump out at you. The other thing we can do is put furigana above a word. Now I'm actually not too sure how to do this in Google Docs. I know how to do it in Word, but you can represent these sounds in romaji. Okay, so well, it doesn't have to be above, whatever, but you know, we'll get to this one in a sec. But we've got a pa here, and then a n. Pa, then n. So you can put that there because sometimes you might be misreading it. So if you write it in English, it can help you when we're doing this fourth step. We can make sure that we're reading it properly. When you get good at katakana, you won't have to do this step anymore, but this is like an intermediate thing we can do while you're still practicing it. Because most people's katakana is going to be a bit rustier compared to their hiragana. Okay. Now, I guess I'm not going to do rule 6, but basically it's the same as rule 5. When you write the furigana out, we're going to end up with a lot of additional vowels. Now, what do I mean when I talk about that? Let's see if this will work. Give me 1 second. Nice. Okay. So if we look at this is the Katakana chart I posted earlier. But we'll notice in Japanese that there really aren't good ways to easily get consonants. Okay? Let's see if I can do this. Give me 1 sec. Nah, it ain't gonna work. Anyway, let's not worry about it. So when we look at our Katakana chart, there are no ways to kind of make consonants. Everything has to have a vowel in it, right? If we want a K sound, we either have to go with a ka, ki, ku, ke, ko. There's no way just to have K. Alright? Now what this means is, with English, that means whenever we try and make words out of katakana, we're going to end up with all these extra vowels that we don't need, because really all we're trying to get is this consonant sound. So you'll see there are some really common patterns. For example, one of them will be that if we want to get a consonant, you tend to use kanji from this u column and this o column, especially at the ends of words, like to have a t or something at the end of a word. They'll use tsu. Alright? So what does that mean for us? It means that we're going to end up with all these extra vowels on the end of words. So when we write our furigana out, it can be useful to just cut out extra vowels, and then that can sometimes make it look a lot more like the word in English once we've written out for it. But I'll show you what this means in a sec. Now, how do you know which extra vowels to cut out? Well, first of all, it's kind of hard. You'll get better at it over time, but normally prime candidates involve the vowels at the end. Okay, that's about it for the rules. I'll probably think of some a bit later. Okay, so we've got our first one, pan. Alright, now some of you might look at this and go, oh, it means pan, like a fry pan. Well, when you're saying, first of all, you're kind of right. When you say fry pan, you say furai pan. Alright, so you don't normally just say pan. This is a different word. Now, pan, this is a bit of a tricky one to go first up with, because this one means bread. You might say, how on earth does pan mean bread? Well, it's important to kind of think of where do katakana words come from, okay? So, Japan didn't have katakana words really. I should probably have looked this up beforehand. But Japan was in kind of an isolationist state for quite a few hundred years, I think. And then in 1850 they were kind of told to open their borders and start trading with everyone. And it was kind of at this point that you know, culture and words in particular started coming to the Japanese mainland, and katakana was basically invented to deal with this issue. So what you'll find is that all these, if you kind of think of Japan like pre-1850, maybe even pre-1900, but think, well, what was in Japan at that time and what wasn't? So the things that weren't, these are the words that are going to need katakana equivalents, right? Because Japanese didn't have a word for these concepts, like bread, for example. And so when they brought in bread, they normally used the word of the people who make it or who invented it. After a while, they just kind of changed it all to English words. But for a while, they were kind of doing this. So pan, those of you who know French, this is the French word for bread. Okay, so that's why it's used, because the French they didn't invent bread, but for sure they're one of the top countries, I guess, that comes to my mind when I think of bread. Okay. Alright. Let me just do one sec. One second. Alright. This next one. Okay, so if we have a go, we'll see we've got the same character as before. And we got ko. This is a he. But we see we've got a little circle on there, which we'd say, we would now pronounce this as pi. Now this is a u, but it's a bit smaller. Okay, it's half size. And so if we think of this in hiragana, it's the same as this. Oops, fat fingered it. Hugh. I guess I should do this. Alright, it's the same. This is the exact same thing. Pew, pew. So just remember, we can represent all katakana sounds with hiragana if we wanted to, because they're the same. Alright, now we've got a stick. So this is a kind of unique feature to katakana, that this lengthens the sound. So again in hiragana we would use an u here to lengthen this, but in katakana we don't bother. We just have a stick, and then we finish with ta. Okay, so computer. Computer. Okay, now this word, oops, this word is computer. Alright, so if we looked at this in furigana, alright, this doesn't really look like this word at all. Computer. Okay, now we'll see here that N and M are kind of interchangeable in Japanese. They don't really, you know, they've got, this is one of the few times you can actually have a standalone consonant, an N sound, but it's kind of close enough, at least for a Japanese person, to substitute the two. Okay, then pewta. Okay, so it's what I kind of noticed made me getting better at katakana was I really looked at how English words work and how pronunciation works, and you notice that when you have this kind of formation where you have a vowel, a consonant and a vowel, you kind of learn how these E's, for example, lengthen these U sounds, stuff like that. So you get better at working at how English words work, I think, as well, when you start practicing your katakana a lot. Alright, and the thing I wanted to point out here is that we end with ta. Okay? Even though we don't, you know, really do this with the English word, this is the only way they can kind of get this T sound. Alright, and they do it with a ta. So again, I would just kind of recommend that you get rid of it. Compute. Alright. Doesn't really work all the time, but something you can do. Okay, what do we got here? Well, we got mi, a little u again, the lengthener. Now this is a shi, okay, with a dakuten, which makes it a ji, just like it does in hiragana. Shi becomes ji. We got a ka and a ru. Alright. So mu ji karu, mu ji karu, mu ji karu, mu ji karu. Right? So just keep saying it to yourself. Mu ji karu, mu ji karu. Now these sticks, these lengthening things, you really have to pay attention to them, because otherwise you have to treat every character and say it with the same cadence or kind of pace. You can't really, like I said, you can't, whatever rule it is, 3, okay? You just have to pronounce the katakana as it is, keep saying it, and it'll eventually sound like a word. So, mujikaru, mujikaru, mujikaru. Alright. So this word is musical. Mujikaru. Now again, we've got our ru on the end. Okay, I guess this should be another rule. Don't know if interchangeability is a word, but this will often happen, okay? So they want to end the word with a consonant, but like I said, we can't do this in katakana. The closest we can get is we're going to get a consonant and a vowel, and we don't really have this L sound in Japanese. So the closest they have is ru. Okay, so this is why you have these jokes of when you do this kind of stereotypical Japanese accents, the L's all disappear and turn into R's. This is the reason. This is the reason. Okay, so again, if we write this out in furigana, okay, again, we would say, well, a prime candidate to get cut off our rule 5. We can kind of musical, okay. And we see here that this S sound, this musical, is pronounced kind of with a G. So G and she, be wary of these as well. Musical. Okay, and this Y doesn't really play a whole big role. It's really, we're trying to get this MU sound. But I mean, we just remember that we have mu in katakana, right? But it's not musikaru. Doesn't really work. Because I probably should do this mu. Okay, we have mu in katakana, but here we want to make musical. It's a bit of a different sound from musical. So that's why they've gone with this. Alright. What else we got here? What we got? He, a, pi, lengthener, su. He, a, pi, su. He, a, pi, su. What's this one? He, a, pi, su. Alright, so the other thing I guess we should be aware of Alright, so as we've seen over our lessons so far, Japanese doesn't really have spaces. And it doesn't really give spaces even when we deal with katakana words. Now, I don't think this, I'm trying to think actually. Looks like it can be both. Looks like it can be both. But, hairpiece, alright? So, in Japanese, you'll sometimes see they'll put these dots. These dots in the middle, and this will designate that there are two words. But they don't have to do it. So, yeah. But this is hairpiece. Alright, like a wig. Now, I want to point out that it's not like Japan didn't have wigs. If you know anything about Japanese theatre, you'll know that they wear quite a lot of wigs. So there is a word for wig, or hairpiece. But this is kind of an issue I take with Japanese generally. It's like, well, they already have a perfectly good word for this in Japanese, but then they, English is kind of cool and all that, so they import the English word and use that instead. Seems like a bit of a waste of time. But yeah, we've got hairpiece. So again, we've got our su at the end. There, if we get rid of this u, hairpiece, it's a little bit easier to work out what it is. Alright, what we got here? We've got a me, a ni, another little u, and again our lengthening stick, our yokobo. So menu, menu, menu. Alright, so we'll see that when we have these combinations like this, we've seen kind of a variety of these ones. Pew, mu, new. We kind of pronounce them all as one block. So me, new, me, new. Alright, and this is menu. Alright, what do we have here? Rotation, 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 rotation. Alright, rotation. Rotation. So far, we should be noticing a little bit of a pattern. Nouns. These are all nouns. So you're very unlikely to get verbs with katakana words. And there are some adjectives. I don't think I've got any. I probably have some in here, but for example, handsome for handsome. But generally, you're going to be dealing with nouns this should be another rule. And to this other point with adjectives, just keep in mind that katakana words are all treated like na adjectives. So handsome na hito. Alright, we need to put our na in there. Anyway, go back to the adjectives lesson if you're unsure of what I'm talking about there. Alright, what do we got here? Alright, we got ha I ki ngu. Hikingu. Hikingu. Alright, so this is hiking. Alright, so again, we've got our gu at the end here. Alright, but we just want gu because we want a G at the end. So if we get rid of that U, hiking. Hiking. Now we're going to see this in actually quite a few words, but this NG, this is basically how the Japanese write this ING part. Ing. Right, the I is kind of coming from here, but that we see this one down here is the same thing. ING on the end. Alright, what do we got here? Ki, little ya, n, and seru. Alright, so kyanseru. 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 Alright. So again, this ru at the end can throw you off quite a bit. So I would recommend, if at all possible, if you're unsure, you always kind of try and do this stuff. Write it out in romaji. So yeah, here, number 5. Kyanseru. And again, we've got our R masquerading as an L sound. Okay, and we see this this kyan quite a lot as well. Alright, bit of a longer one. So we've got ku, ri, su, ma, su, tsu, ri, and then a lengthener. Kuri, su, ma, su, tsu, ri. Kuri, su, ma, su, tsu, ri. Now, having done this list of words with many of my students before, a lot of people get the first bit. Kurisumasu. So also a word I think we looked at last week. Kurisumasu. But what's this last bit? So I know a lot of people have had a lot of issues with this. So let's write the whole thing out. Kuri su ma su tsu ri. Oh, I guess I should write this. Okay. So again, we could kind of expect, oops, that it could be written like this. I haven't really seen it written like that before, to be honest, but it's possible. Let's just say that. So we're kind of looking at two words like this. Alright, but what is this? Tsuri. Tsuri. Alright, it's not 3, as a lot of people try and tell me. Christmas 3, not quite. But so close. Alright, Christmas tree. Okay, so we're going to see that this tsu sound gets used in lots of katakana words to represent a whole bunch of different sounds. So just kind of keep your mind open as to the possibilities that this could cover. Christmas tree. Tsuri. Alright. Now this is a good word because it shows us kind of the flexibility of katakana. Alright, so if we read this, it would be ra, I, to, raito. Now just remember whatever rule it was. 7? No, 6. Alright, so it could really be any of these words. Light, right, or right. Alright, it's probably more likely to be light. But it could be any of these things. Raito, raito, raito. All the same in katakana. But of course, you know, Japan has a word for light, denki. They have a word for right, migi. And they have a word for right, kaku. Could be any of these things. Oh, you'd have to always go by the context, I guess. Alright, this is kind of a sneaky one. I like this one. Alright, so we've got a lengthener, mondo. Amondo. Amondo. I've had people look at me with exasperated expression on their face. What is this word? Okay. Almond. So we can kind of see, like, this is the kind of ingenious way that Japanese works. You can look at a word and it'll tell you, you know, katakana will actually tell you the pronunciation of a word. We don't really have this luxury in English. I mean, you have to get quite good at English to be able to pronounce a word that you've never heard of before and pronounce it correctly, because basically there's all these weird exception rules in English. But with Japanese, when you can have never seen a word before, but if you pronounce it as per the phonetic style in katakana, you can kind of work out the word. But just notice that this L is kind of come out of nowhere. It's kind of implied between the R and the mo. Almond. Alright, this next one's a hard one, and I always, if the students are doing well, I'll normally skip a lot of these and try and get them to say this one. So what have we got? E, I, Z, U, I, R, S. Alright, this is a really, really tricky one. It's actually two words. Okay, so AIDS is AIDS. AIDS, and this is uirus. Alright, so we've manufactured this V sound out of an U and an E. Now, if we look at our Katakana chart, we'll see down the bottom here that, see, we have these additional letters for foreign sounds. So we'll see here an U and an E. Kind of looks like this. We could put a dakuten on our U, which you cannot do with hiragana. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it there for now. There's more words here, and I'd really encourage you guys to practice and try and work out. I'll go through the answers next week. If you really can't work it out, just go to the dictionary, Jim Breen's dictionary, and copy paste them in from the Google Sheet, Google Doc, sorry, and it'll work that way. Now, I did just want to mention operation change. Okay, I just wanted to mention this Jlpt. So this is a really great exam. It's kind of run by the Japanese government, not really, but they kind of oversee it, I guess. But Jlpt, Japanese Language Proficiency Test. Now, it's run twice a year, but in Australia, it's only generally run once a year. I think Canberra and Sydney and stuff, they run it twice, but generally it's run every year in December. So there's 5 levels, N5 to N1, N1's the hardest. So I have N2, I'm going to go for N1 this year. And this is a really great website, and I always say, like, if you're not in school and you don't have, you know, you're not taking Japanese as a class, you still want to have some kind of goal. And I think the Jlpt is a great goal. So if you're an absolute beginner, you could get qualified for N5 within 1 year. You know, you could learn all the things. Now, there's sample questions and all that. It kind of tells you what you need to know for each level. It's kind of a very general thing. Now, you can buy books as well, which are really helpful. I've really credit the fact that I've managed to pass every level so far due to the fact that I've bought good textbooks. There's none that I would really recommend. They're all pretty good. The one I'm using at the moment, I'll just pop it up on screen. The one, let me just do this a sec. Okay. The one I'm using right now, and no, I don't get paid for this, but it's this guy. Okay, that's reversed, I guess, but it's by a company that's called White Rabbit Publishing. And yeah, but if you just type in Jlpt into Amazon or eBay or whatever, there's plenty of textbooks. Now I think this is like $20 Australian. It's pretty much nothing, very cheap, plus a few dollars postage from Japan. But you'll just find that the books which are specifically designed for Jlpt, I just like them because they're very well formatted, and they kind of set stuff out in a logical manner. So that's why it can be good. But yep, I found these books to be very, very helpful. So I would really, I recommend all my students that you should go for Jlpt every year. So, you can do the sample test and find out what level you are about. But if you're kind of an absolute beginner, you're probably going to have to start with N5. After about a year or two of study, maybe N4. They actually have guidelines saying, well, how many years of study you not generally have to do to pass this exam. But just keep in mind that the data is kind of skewed because you have like Chinese and Koreans who really don't have to do as much study just because they've got such a big shared linguistic background. So they have changed the test to kind of accommodate that, but really you need quite a lot of kanji to do well in these exams. There's basically a whole kanji section, so that's always going to benefit the Chinese and Malaysians and people like that. Having said that, though, it's just not impossible, but it's a very good exam, and it's all multi-choice as well. So a lot of people really like that. But you just got to understand that the exam is multi-choice for everyone. So whatever benefits you may perceive, everyone's going to get those same benefits. Okay, well, thanks so much for watching, everyone. Again, please check out my Atom Gumtree. Please like and subscribe to the channel for future videos, live streaming every Monday. Anyone's welcome to jump into the chat and ask some questions, and if it's not too much of a deviation from what I was currently looking at, I'm happy to kind of go off and answer any specific questions that you guys may have. Alright, so that's it, and please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.